Presenting the user with a request for an AppStore review is a good way to get feedback on your app. They can both be a blessing and a curse, and I don't know why, but a bad review sticks with me far longer than a good one does. Nevertheless, getting some good reviews helps downloads and encourages you to fix bugs and make your apps better. I have an earlier video on this topic, but things have changed in iOS 16, so if your app is running iOS 16 or later, this is the video for you. I have updated the project and added a new twist. Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and in this video we're going to be looking at how we can use the new requestReview environment value to get an instance of the requestReviewAction struct so that we can have the app make the request on our behalf. I'll also show you how you can provide your users with a button so that they can submit a review at any time they like. Along the way we'll discover some new iOS 16 features as well, such as presentation detents, new background toolbar modifiers, and a new task sleep function. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. I've created a starter project for this tutorial as always, and I encourage you to download it and work along with me. In the end, you'll have a working project with transferable code that you'll be able to use in your own projects whenever you wish to implement this. There's nothing really to this app. What I want to show you is how you can get the app to display an app review request somewhere and sometime during your app's lifecycle. So the main screen here is simply an image that I've stored in the Assets folder, and a toolbar button that, when tapped, presents a bottom sheet up 40% of the screen using the new presentation detent introduced in iOS 16. And I have a video on this topic, and I'll leave a link in the description should you wish to watch it. The view that is presented is the App Info view, and it's pretty basic with a title and a group box displaying a multi-line text view. I've also added a toolbar with a text view using an empty string as the toolbar item, and I did that so that I can create a toolbar and set the toolbar background color for the navigation bar to make it visible. If I didn't have the toolbar item, no toolbar would be displayed. These two functions are new to iOS 16 and only apply if you have a toolbar, so that we can change the background color. At the time of creating this video, the sample code on the Apple website has not been updated for iOS 16 yet, but the overview provided at this page from Apple still holds. When you get your app to make a request to prompt the user to leave a rating and a review, the system displays to the user a maximum of 3 times within a 365-day period. You can determine when and where your app displays the prompt to request a review. You need to think about the best places within your app to show a request for review and what conditions are appropriate to delay it. And here are some best practices. Try to make the request at a time that doesn't interrupt the user. For example, at the end of a sequence of events that the user successfully completes. Avoid showing a request for review immediately when a user launches your app, even if it isn't the first time that it launches. Avoid requesting a review as the result of a user action. Also, remember that the user can disable requests for reviews from ever appearing on the device. How and when you make those decisions will be up to you. But in this app, we're going to try and meet those recommendations. We're going to set a threshold that will require the user to complete a process X number of times before a request is attempted. Having a threshold will prevent the app from requesting a review when the user first completed the process, so that only users with some experience with your app will get the request. We'll only make the request once per version of our app. This means once a request for a review has been made, we'll not pester the user to leave a review until an update to the app is out, at which time we'll reset the counter and start all over again, letting the user get some experience with the app before we present the request. After the user has been prompted to leave a review, we'll display another way for the user to initiate a rating and/or a written review whenever they wish. Keep in mind that when they're prompted, users might not want to leave a review, so we stop pestering them until the next update comes out, and in the meantime, they may wish to leave or even update a previous review, so we'll give them that option. You may choose your own logic, But this way, I can get 3 updates out to my app over the course of a year, and there's a good chance that the user will be prompted to leave a review during that time if they've reached my threshold while using the app. So, as I said, you determine the best time to do this. In this app, I'm going to do that after the user has checked out his info screen at least 3 times, and on the 3rd presentation, when they dismiss the screen, I'll ask them for a review. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an enum that I can use to store some constant static properties and functions that I'll be able to use from anywhere within my app. So create a file and call it AppReviewRequest. Inside there, create an enum with the same name, and this will serve as a namespace so long as I use static properties and functions. Next, we can create a static property that will represent our threshold that must be reached before we present the user with a request to review our app. So, during testing, I want it to happen fairly quickly, so I'm going to set that threshold to 3. We'll want to store both where we were with respect to the threshold and whether or not we've presented a review for the current version. So we'll need to know when we have to present another one. We can do that by storing our information in user defaults. And in SwiftUI, we can use the app storage property wrapper. So we'll need to change our import here to SwiftUI. Now we can create 2 app storage properties that will also need to be static properties, because enums can't have stored properties itself. So for the first one, we'll use the app storage for using the string runs since last request. We can copy that string and create a static variable with the same name, and then assign it the value of 0. Initially, no runs have been taken yet. For the second, we'll use that for our stored version. So again, we'll just copy that string that we use for the app storage value and create a static property of the same name and set it to an empty string. Next, create a computed property named requestReview, and it'll be a Boolean value. And within here, we're going to print some statements so that we can watch what's going on. First, we'll need to know what the current version is for our app. Every time you release a new version for your app on the App Store, you'll need to create a new version. And you can see that when you're in your App Store Connect. In your Xcode project, this gets entered on the General tab as the version number in the Identity section of your target. If you go to the Info tab, you'll see the entries that you made in what is the visual representation of the info.plist that prior to Xcode 13 was a separate file. When we had that file, it was pretty easy to view as the XML, and we could see the corresponding numbers match up with the actual keys that are used in the info.plist dictionary. Unfortunately, we'd have to do a lot of work to get that information for you. And you may think that the key that you want is the one corresponding to the bundle version, but that's not actually correct. This happens to correspond to the current project's build number. The actual app version number that you enter in the App Store Connect is the one that you can see here, which is the marketing version. If you right-click on the row and choose Display Raw Keys and Values, we do not see the value change, but you see the key change from bundle version string short to CF bundle short version string. And that's what we need. So click on that field so that you can copy it. This is a key piece of information that we'll need along with our threshold and our run since last refresh and our current stored version. Now we can create a property called appVersion that is the bundle.main object for info dictionary key, which is what we just copied. So we can paste that in. And we'll need to cast that as a string, and it won't fail, so we'll use as ! Next, let's increment the run since last request. So every time this value is accessed, we will increment the runs since last request. Then we can print out 3 statements that let us see where we're at. First, we'll say print the run count and get the runs since last request. We'll follow that with an app version and then using again string interpolation to get the app version. And then finally we'll get the stored version, again using string interpolation here. Let's make sure I got colons after each one of our placeholders here. Next, I'm going to do a guard check to see if our stored version is not equal to the current app version, which it will be initially because our stored version is simply an empty string. However, once we do make a request, we're going to store that app version in our stored version property so that they will be equal eventually. So in the else clause, we can print out another statement here. We'll simply say that there has been no update since the last request. And then we can set our run since last request to 0 so that we really have never incremented, waiting again for the next update. And then we'll return false. Now, if we've gotten this far, it means that for the current version, we've not yet made a request for review. So we'll need to check to see if we've reached or exceeded our threshold. Then we can print out a statement to verify this, threshold reached, so make a request for the version. And then we can update our stored version with that current app version. We'll set our runs since last request back to 0, but here's the key, we'll return true so that in our app, when we request this value and it's true, we'll make that request to have the AppStore review presented to the user. If we haven't yet reached our threshold, we'll print out another statement saying waiting to reach threshold before making request, and then just return false. If I return to the main view now then, we'll want to check to see if we need to request a review once they've viewed and dismissed the info sheet. And we'll base this on the value of that request review completed property from our AppReviewRequest Enum. So the easy way to do this is then within an onDismiss block on our sheet. So let's add that block in now. There's a new environment value called requestReview that behaves just like the dismiss environment value. We can use it to call the function associated with the requestReview struct instance action. So first we'll need to import StoreKit. Then we'll create that new environment value for the key path requestReview, and we'll assign it to a variable of the same name. Within the onDismiss function, we'll first check to see if we need to display a request. This will increment the counter and check to see if we're on a new version and whether or not we have reached the threshold. If so, then we can make the request, and this is really easy in iOS 16. Now, it's never a good idea to do this right at the instance the process has completed, however. The Apple example suggests that we introduce a slight delay. So I'm going to do that using an asynchronous task that will sleep for 1 second before making the request. This, though, is asynchronous, so it will require a task unit of work. And then I'm going to use a new function for task sleep that was introduced in iOS 16 as well, and that is the sleep until function. And that's going to allow us to specify a given deadline with a tolerance and a clock type. Well, I'm going to specify a 1 second duration from now, meaning it's going to sleep for 1 second. I'll provide a tolerance of half a second, or 0.5, and then I'll choose a suspending clock. Now we get an error suggesting that this is throwing an error, so we'll need to add try, and it's an asynchronous task, so we'll need to use await. So we try and await for a duration of 1 second, and then we can present the request review. Let me test it on the simulator right now. I'll show the app info screen and dismiss it, and we can see on the console we have a run count of 1, an app version of 1, there is no stored version, and we're told that we're waiting to reach the threshold. When I try for a second time, the run count increments to 2. Try a third time, it's now at 3. We're told that the threshold has been reached, and therefore 1 second later, the review screen is displayed. Now you can't actually leave a review here, but that's okay. It will work if we see this screen. If I try for a fourth time, you'll notice that there is now a stored version, and no matter how many times we perform the process, it will not be presented for a request to review. And the run count will always be showing 1 because we always reset it to 0 if our app version and stored versions match. So let's pretend that we have a new version. So on the General tab, let's change the version to 1.1, and let's run once more. This time the app version and stored versions don't match again, and we're back to waiting until we meet the threshold. One thing to note is that when you call this instance while your app is in development mode, the system always displays a rating and review request so that you can test the user interface and experience. So you're not limited to that 3 times within a 365-day period. That's only for apps that have been published. Once the request has been made and there are no version changes, the user is not prompted until a new update has been submitted to the App Store. So let's give our users the ability to do that on their own. Back in our enum, first let's create a static function called AppURL that has one parameter, an ID, which is a string that will be the ID number of your app, and it will return an optional URL. Let's create a property called WriteURL, and it is going to be a URL formed by a string that makes a request to the apps.apple.com/app/ID followed by your app's ID. And we'll use string interpolation here to pass in the ID that we get when we receive this function call. And then we'll have an action that is write review. Now this has to be unwrapped, so we can use a guardlet. And then if for some reason I don't have a valid URL, we can print to the console and return nil. Else, we'll return that write review URL. Let's create one more static property that'll let us know when to show the review button. And we only want to do that if the stored version is equal to the app version, meaning we've already prompted the user for a review once. So let's copy the app version property from the other function and then return the result when we compare the stored version against the app version. Back in the app info view then, above the spacer, we can first check to see if the AppReviewRequest show review button is true. And if our URL for the AppReviewRequest.appURL using an ID from one of your apps, so I'm going to enter an ID from one of my apps, and if it's successful, it won't be optional, so we can create a link using that destination and then using a text view that is simply going to specify write a review as the label. And then this link can be treated as a button, so we can apply a button style, and I'll make it bordered prominent. So I'm going to return then to the info tab here and set the version number to 1.2. And I'm going to run the app once more. And we can see that I'm back at a 0 run count. So the first one is going to make me at 1. And then as I finally reach the threshold, we get our request to make a review. And then on subsequent presentations of the app info screen, we can see that button. If I click on that button here, it gives us an invalid address in the simulator, and that's to be expected. So let me just test by running this on my iPhone. So I'm going to bring that up onto the screen, and I'm going to run this, and this is a first run on this device, so I'm going to have to step through that process 3 times before we get a request for an app review. On the 4th time, I see that button now that I can tap on, and I'm immediately taken to a review screen where I can enter both a rating and a review for my wine cellar app. Perhaps I should give it a glowing review. Maybe you should. When I dismiss the review, I actually get to see the AppStore page for that particular app. Well, anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something that you'll be able to use in your projects. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. Subscribe to my channel so that you get notifications of future videos. Thanks for watching.